And at the same time, so like one foot is on the career prep side. And at the same time, the other foot is firmly planted and saying like, we're challenging the establishment, because that's the only way you produce change. Like you can't, as Vickie always says, I'll quote you, even though you're on the podcast, the people that got us into this are not the ones that are going to get us out. And the system that got us in is not the system that's going to get us out. So we have to challenge the establishment. So that's a little bit of a balance act. I think we pull it off like beautifully. Sometimes people in the establishment do get a little bit like, who the heck are you? And what are you trying to do? Like, tell me that again. And sometimes they're supportive, but it's hard to be a rebel sometimes. And we are definitely rebels.
Welcome back to Eco Alarm, the podcast where we break down the major factors affecting the environment and explore what we can do to help. I'm your host, Imani.
And I'm your host, Bo. And today we'll be talking to Diego and Vickie, the founders of Voiz.
So Voiz is a community of Gen Z students looking to change the way we view corporate sustainability. To do this, Voiz offers an 8-week internship program where students can learn how to critically analyze the sustainability of the products we use every day. Over the summer, I was actually a part of the program, and it was such a great experience.
They're now introducing Voiz to college campuses, including one coming to USC. Since it started in 2020, Voiz has grown into a network of over 50 schools across the world and a database of thousands of product reviews.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. We're here with our guests, Vickie and Diego from Voiz Reviews, and we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability and what they do over there. So I guess we'll start with Vickie. If you want to introduce yourself, where you're from, your career background, any of that, feel free.
Well, first, thank you for having us. My name is Vickie Onodera, and I am a career educator that lives in Denver, Colorado. I just retired from a 29-year career as a high school English teacher and an instructional coach, worked on culturally responsive education as well as PD facilitation for teachers, and did a lot of work with students and student voice. So yeah, I've recently transitioned to Voiz, and so I'm really excited to be part of the community and as we grow and work together.
Awesome. Diego, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Diego Espinosa, and I'm a co-founder of Voiz, founded about a little over a year ago. And I have kind of a varied career. I've been a strategy consultant, I've been a money manager and a Wall Street analyst, and I've been a research director managing Wall Street analysts. I can go into why that's relevant to Voiz, actually. And also been a college adjunct professor and a tech entrepreneur in the blockchain space. And all of those experiences basically were like a big arrow pointing towards Voiz, so believe it or not.
Great. I guess I'm sure we explained it on the intro, but if you guys could explain a little bit about what Voiz is and maybe how you got involved.
Okay, sure. So, Voiz is basically a way to amplify and, first educate, but then amplify the voices of Gen Zs when it comes to how our economy should work and how it should become more sustainable. And the idea behind Voiz is that sustainability, so much of it is about the economy, right? The product life cycles that produce carbon emissions and the supply chains that will have fair or not fair trade, how companies are being inclusive or not, what's happening to products after we dispose with them. Those are all the kind of elements of sustainability, and they have a big impact on our world. And so the idea is that impact is going to affect young people. It's their world to inherit, to be in the future, and the decision makers that are deciding on those product designs and how they're made and so forth. They're in authority today, but there's nothing against them to say that they won't be around 40 years ago, 40 years from now, most of them. And so there's this fundamental imbalance. The people that are making decisions are not the ones that are most impacted by in the future, and also today, because it's not about the future for communities that are being marginalized. It's environmental and social impact that they're experiencing today. Their voices are not invited to the table. So Voiz is an attempt to remedy that. To help remedy that. It can't be the only one. It's got to be a lot more. And so we're trying to educate Gen Zs on how the economy works and whether it's sustainable or not, how corporations work, and then give them the tools to evaluate and scrutinize those corporate actions, and then be able to tell consumers what's going on, and in that way, indirectly and also directly, talking directly to corporations, have a say over what happens and how the economy evolves.
Yeah, and so I came to Voice several months ago. I actually met Diego via social media late last year, and he was talking about starting a high school program similar to what we have at the universities. And so with my experience, we started to connect and talk about the curriculum, and then pretty soon realized there were a lot of sort of intersections between the work that I was doing around responsiveness and culturally responsive education and kind of the intersection between sustainability and racial justice. So started talking a lot about that. And then I came on as a co-founder in June. And for me, I think the appeal, along with the opportunity to continue working with students, is also this idea of, I've always been a big proponent of, amplifying voice and agency and really making sure that the people most impacted by decisions have a voice in those decisions. And so the whole sort of premise of Voice really appealed to me. I see a lot of connections between what it means to be responsive and what we have to do to ensure that we can create an equitable and sustainable future. So for me, it just was a natural fit for us to work together, and it's been really great so far.
I'd be kind of curious to if there was any specific connections that you saw while you were doing your work in education that kind of you see similarly in your work in sustainability.
Absolutely. I think about this a lot, particularly with my work around racial justice. And I think about, as we start to focus, and I think rightfully so, more on the larger systemic racist issues, I see that as kind of a parallel to the need to focus on corporations and larger sort of systemic causes to issues around sustainability. And so while there are individual acts that we definitely want to, eliminate and focus on doing specific things, but if we look at the entire system, we really have to say, like, what's the source, right? What's that larger kind of mechanism that's having the greatest impact and doing the greatest harm? And so when I think about sustainability and the SDG 12, and I think about, this is about what is being produced and how it's being produced, I see a lot of parallels to that. And so for me, it just seemed like a natural fit around kind of the work that, whenever you're trying to really work on solving an injustice and creating a more equitable, sustainable world, that's kind of an area that you need to focus on along with those other areas as well.
Yeah, definitely. Bo, if you want to jump in to kind of talk about the products that Voiz reviews and kind of how they're evaluated. I mean, we kind of just talked about your background and how that relates, but I guess how do you translate that into Voice's curriculum and how you teach Gen Zs how to review their products?
Yeah, so I didn't mention it because you'd asked like what made you gravitate towards Voiz, and I guess I would add that when I was a Wall Street research analyst, so those are the people that tell you whether like buy or sell a stock, because it's going up or it's going down, and they write research reports and they scrutinize the company for their profits. And so I used to regularly meet with like top management of companies, like CEOs, and I was like in my early 30s, kind of like late 20s, and I would like hold them accountable for the profits. Like, why are you doing this? And, why not that? And, and so as I started to get more and more into sustainability, it kind of dawned on me, like, why aren't there people doing that more on the sustainability side? Like, after all, like, isn't it more important for the CEOs to be producing sustainability than profits in the scheme of things? Like in terms of like how society feels about it, not just like the shareholders. And so someone needs to hold them accountable in the same way that I used to hold them accountable for the decisions they're making at a really granular level. Like I used to get nitpicky and be like, hey, what about this and what about that? And so the idea behind the reviews that students do at Voiz is to really understand what's happening when a person clicks by. Like what is the chain of events that kind of cascades from that? And so it's basically like the mining of like the metal for a cell phone, and then it's being sent to different parts of the world and like soldered with other pieces of metal and then assembled and all these things, and then it's being used, and then it's being used again, and then maybe thrown away and to become e-waste. And so it's understanding that whole chain of events and asking critical thinking questions, like who's benefiting from what's going on? Like, first of all, like what's going on? Who's benefiting? Why is it happening? How could it be different? And I think that that part of critical thinking is probably the most interesting one, which is like, how could it be different? Because that's the invention of every reviewer. We don't have like a template or like, look on this spreadsheet and you can get standards for everything. Like, how do you standardize racial justice? Like we could do a whole show about that. And so it's kind of like the subjective experience and the values of the reviewer that is evaluating what's going on, and then saying to themselves, like, I'm okay with this, or I'm not okay with this. Like, this needs to change. And so that's what Voice Reviews is. It's like there is critical thinking, there's rigor, and there's creativity, but it comes from engagement and really caring about the outcome and what should be happening instead of what is happening.
And I would add too, I think, the former English teacher in me, what I love about the way that these reviews are written is that it has student voice in it. I mean, our students it's not an objective, checklist type of rubric. It's saying, I reviewed this product and hey, this is what I found out and I'm not loving it, right? Like, here's how this makes me feel about this product. And this is what I think should happen. And I think when you can make, as a writer, an emotional connection with your reader and you're saying like, this is what's coming up for me as I review this product, I think that kind of humanizes the experience and does hold people more accountable for that, versus when you can just sort of distill it down into statistical data and try to, because then people can sort of try to argue that, but how you feel is how you feel about these products. And I think particularly for Gen Z to be able to say like, we're not okay with this, or this is great, do more of this and less of that, I think that has a way more profound impact on kind of swaying people's opinions and also getting people to maybe change the way that they're producing these products.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear about kind of how you guys collaborate on this project when you have vastly different backgrounds. Diego coming from a finance background, looking at things from companies, shareholders' perspective, and Vickie from more of an educator's point of view. So next, I'd love to talk more about sort of the challenges you guys face in creating and sustaining Voice as an organization.
Well, yeah, actually, it's been one of those things where I think the challenges have been very much within the realm of like the excitement around producing it in the first place, right? So of course, there's always challenges around getting people to know who you are, right? To know that we exist, that the reviews are out there, and for me specifically, to kind of help high schools understand, like, this is something that we can do with high school students as well. We've done a couple pilots, but I think it's a little bit different than the kind of curriculum or the kind of clubs that you typically see in schools. And so a lot of it is just like, how do we sort of amplify who we are, because I think we're doing a lot of really great work, and it's just a matter of like kind of getting people to understand that. And I think that's always going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think as we have more and more students, and they always say like word of mouth is probably the best, but that's really what we're seeing is people are talking about, hey, I did this, these 8 weeks and it was really great, and that might be something you want to think about, and it's starting to kind of snowball more. But I think that's definitely one of the challenges that we have, along with launching the high school program.
Yeah, and I would say, there's always lots of challenges when you have a new venture, and we are a little bit different in that respect, because like we're trying to do something new to the outside world, but also internally we're trying to do new stuff at the same time, which is like really hard. And it's kind of like a toddler, like learning how to walk and like, juggle at the same time or something like that. So what we're trying to do with the outside world is, it's a balancing act. We're trying to help students get the experience and the kind of like education they need to discover what they already know and how to use it with respect to environmental science and sustainability. And at the same time, so like one foot is on the career prep side. And at the same time, the other foot is firmly planted and saying like, we're challenging the establishment, because that's the only way you produce change. Like you can't, as Vickie always says, I'll quote you, even though you're on the podcast, the people that got us into this are not the ones that are going to get us out. And the system that got us in is not the system that's going to get us out. So we have to challenge the establishment. So that's a little bit of a balance act. I think we pull it off like beautifully. Sometimes people in the establishment do get a little bit like, who the heck are you? And what are you trying to do? Like, tell me that again. And sometimes they're supportive, but it's hard to be a rebel sometimes. And we are definitely rebels. Internally, we're trying to build a sustainable organization. And the question is like, what does a sustainable organization look like? And there's not enough organizations out there modeling it. And so we're kind of like having them write the playbook as we go along. And you guys can all imagine the dimensions. Like, we need to be more inclusive. We need to be more diverse. We need to have a culture that is inclusive and that welcomes everyone and where they feel like they belong. We need to be equitable, and we need to be transparent, because the firms that we're, that the students are evaluating, they're all evaluating for the transparency. And so like, we need to have like a really high level of transparency in what we do. And so all of that really occupies our mind, is not only how do we build a different system externally, but how do we model that internally and create change by who we are and how we do things.
Yeah, and I was wondering if there's any ways that like Voiz is doing that currently in terms of like transparency or diversity and inclusion, or any efforts that you're kind of getting the ball rolling on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's at the forefront of how we are building our system here, right? Like, as we think about our organization. And I think we're constantly, Diego kind of referenced kind of modeling the practice we want to see. And so we're being as transparent as we possibly can too, and being able to identify like, okay, like so many other organizations, we need to ensure that we are very inclusive, right? And that our organization reflects the world, the way that the world looks, right? And that's always a challenge. And I think when we think about it, again, I'm one of those people who thinks kind of on a technical level, but then builds up and out on the adaptive, and thinking about, okay, so what does it take to create an inclusive environment, right? Like, what does that look like? Because it's not just getting people in the organization, but it's also when people are here that they feel validated, affirmed, cared for, that their voices are heard. So being very mindful of that. I've spent many, many years learning about culturally responsive education, really identifying and working with the work of Dr. Adeyemi Stembridge around the 6 tenets of responsiveness. And so we've tried to really overlay those into our organization, into every aspect, so that we are, modeling vulnerability, so that we are ensuring that there's a high level of rigor, that we are beyond just kind of the superficial engagement, really going for that cognitive and affective engagement. So we spend a lot of times thinking about that. We've done some inclusive training with students. We've done some lunch and learns, but also not just kind of as one-offs, but thinking about how does it permeate the whole system, right? So that people are constantly seeing us model that they're modeling it in their leadership roles, that they have support to do that. And so, yeah, it's challenging, but it's been a commitment that we have, that I feel really good about the direction that we're headed there. But a big piece of it is our willingness to say, like, we're still not there. We got to work. We got to, like, nope. I'm always like, not yet. Right. Like, got to do better. And I think that's unique, because I think a lot of people, and a lot of organizations just go by numbers, and they don't really think about, like, how do people feel when they're in our organization? We want people to stay. We want people to feel a sense of belonging, that they're here and that they're heard. For me as a Latina and just, working 29 years in a career, knowing what it feels like on both sides of that, right? Where I'm in spaces where I'm validated and affirmed, and spaces where not so much. And where was I willing to put my time, effort, and energy, and where did I sort of quietly exit because I just didn't feel affirmed? And so we spend a lot of time thinking about that and taking actionable steps to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's an amazing mission, and it's great to hear how far you guys have come so far. And I kind of want to circle back to a point Diego made about helping students kind of taking the first step in their career in sustainability, because we frequently have guests on the podcast talk about the challenges of starting a career in just nonprofit in general, because there's just so many obstacles. When you graduate, you think about kind of your career trajectory, think about, more realistic things. And I would love to get into sort of, as Voiz is, going, keep expanding on more campuses. Where do you guys see the organization in the future?
I think this would be a good question for you, Diego, to talk a little bit about kind of our plans as we move forward.
Yeah, but I want to hear you say it, but okay. I'll go first, I guess. And so, I think we have to have a mission of like going big and going home. And the reason for that is because, Like Voice starts from a theory of change. Like what can we do to move the needle? And like, that's like, some organizations can have a theory of change about a community, like a small like neighborhood or whatever. And that's awesome. Like, you know, and they can have a lot of impact there. It's just that we took on this question of like, how do we make corporations in the world really make decisions that are much more sustainable? And you can only do that. You can only get their attention. You can only counterbalance their power if you're big. And so, so when you say like, what is Voice going to look like in the future? I gotta say, like, Voice is going to be big. Like, it's going to be upwards of 100,000 students. It's going to be on, you know, like 500, 1,000 campuses all across the world. We already are in many campuses in different points of the world. It's going to be an organization that is really easy to join and get involved and start contributing to. And technology is going to play a role in that. And might as well say it, like, for those of you that know what this is, like, we're becoming a blockchain DAO in order to do that. So we're all about like innovating and saying, yeah, we want to be big, but like nonprofits, the vast majority of them don't get big, right? So how do we do things differently? And one of those is employing technology, and especially this technology for running decentralized, self-organizing organizations that are basically run by their communities. So like, Voice can only be big if it's run by the community. Like, if it's me saying like, hey, everybody do this and come this way and whatever, like, that's only going to get me so far. Like, I think I have good abilities and everything, but like, it's just so much more powerful if it's students and their own passion and their own energy driving it forward. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create an organization that's really easy and transparent to join, contribute to, deal with, know what the rules are, have a sense that you not only belong, but that you own it. I prefer you share it rather than own it. You share that organization. Part of it, you know, is part of you. And so if we can construct that, we can get really big and have an impact on the world.
Yeah, I think one of the most appealing parts of, as we look into the future, and I've already seen it just being part of the organization, is that it's an organic sort of living thing. And so a lot of times it has gone in directions that we didn't necessarily expect, because it was student driven. You know, even the high school program, a lot of that came out of students saying, gosh, I wish I would have had something like this college program when I was in high school. Like, the first time I ever really started to have an in-depth knowledge is when I took, you know, AP environmental, or, you know, it would have been great if I could have started younger, if I could have, and we're like, yeah, we could do that. A lot of ideas just coming from students saying, hey, I think we can do a pilot at my old school and maybe I can reach out. And so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, one of the great parts of this, many great parts of this, is that it is so community driven that I think we're going to see, especially as we become a DAO, lots of people coming together and saying, I kind of have an interest here and I'm thinking I want to maybe explore this. What do you think? And we can support that. We can say, yeah, let's do it. And because it's not based on a hierarchy, it can be very driven by just a small group of students who may have a specific interest, and then back within the DAO or kind of sharing that interest or getting support as they go through. So I predict that, you know, in the future, we're going to see a very large community, people who are still with us, people who were part of our organization before and kind of come in and out. But I think there's lots of opportunity for growth that, you know, it's hard to predict where it'll go. I think the mission and the vision and the greater conceptual understanding is solid, and that we'll have that, but that the sky's kind of the limit based on what our students want to do and where their interests lie. And we're going to support that as we move forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like so admirable, like how, I guess, ambitious, and just seeing how much it's grown since I've been in it for such a little bit of time, like between the high school program and expanding the college program. I guess kind of going off of that, there's so many new things that are coming out. I guess for any people listening, they're like, oh my gosh, I totally want to do this. Like, how, I guess if you can list off all the different ways that they can kind of get involved with Voice, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I'll take that one. So our core program is an 8-week sustainability analyst program where you come in and you get the training. There's a lot of opportunity to interact with peers in that training. So a lot of what we do is peer-led education. And that means that you get to like discover with other college students, like, what are they seeing in their reviews and how do people feel about it and what should be done? And so this is a conversation that's ongoing within that training. And so week by week, what you're doing is you're picking a product or an organization. It could be sports equipment, it could be fashion, it could be a cell phone. and you're seeing how it's made, who makes it, and what it's made of. And so you're evaluating those things. You're researching it, and then you're writing a review about it. You come into what's called a review session, and we talk about it with your peers. So that core program is an 8-week program, and we put about 270 students through it from about 50 universities, really, kind of all over the world. So, but there are other ways to get involved too. There's an advocacy track where we have different teams that advocate and kind of communicate with the external world. Social media, editorial, where you write articles, education, which Vickie can talk more about, and brands and partners, which basically network with companies to have a dialogue with them and brands and get them on our side, or just plain like talk to them about what we're saying, what you guys are saying, and what's going on. And so that advocacy track is like ongoing. People can stay in that. And then there's also an opportunity to be involved in your campus. We're rolling out local campus chapters at 8 universities this fall. And if you're interested in starting one at your school, please let us know, because we're growing that way. And then finally, there's leadership opportunities. You can be a leader of one of these teams. You can be a leader, a pod leader for the sustainability analysts, where you're actually vetting their reviews and giving them coaching and feedback on how to improve them. And so for this fall, we have about 15 sustainability analyst leads, and Mani is one of them, and I'm really excited about that. And so there's plenty of opportunities for leadership, especially as the organization grows and expands. So Voice is something that we want people to be engaged with, stay engaged with as long as they want, come in and out of, and really find all kinds of different ways to contribute.
And Vickie, if you wanted to expand a little bit about the education section.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the advocacy tracks is our education track. And on that track, we started spending, really kind of focusing on expanding into the high school realm, but then also because, again, we sort of are driven by student interest and what we kind of generate as we meet together and collaborate on ideas, and are moving towards some content production of, really looking at, okay, so what's out there that we can, kind of do differently, right? That kind of models the values of our organization and kind of that idea of voice and advocacy and agency. And so a lot of our students on that track have been working on producing video, really looking at some content that we can sort of put out into the universe and see who sort of picks that up. And it's actually been really cool, a lot of fun to kind of see what they've been able to produce. And it'll be interesting to see how that works. And as we become a DAO, I think we're going to see a lot of sort of groups of students who are saying, like, here's a contribution I can make in this particular area. And so in the area of content creation, that's definitely a focus for the advocacy track, the education advocacy track right now.
If I can follow on that just a little bit, like as a whole, like what does Voice look like in the future? We're already one of the biggest producers of content about sustainability, literally in the world. Like we have an editorial team. We had 120 students this summer, and producing like, one page each a week. And so like, imagine how many newsrooms about sustainability that have like 6 people or 7 people, right? So, and we're only going to get bigger. And so I think that in education, in editorial, in all kinds of content surrounding sustainability, we will actually be like a real force to be reckoned with, where everyone kind of thinks like, what is Voice saying? What does Voice think about this? Or what are the people at Voice? Because we don't have a single opinion on stuff. And that's going to be a really, hopefully shake up the world.
Yeah, that's exactly what, we are trying to do, your guys are trying to do, and hopefully we can work together and get the word out about all the things sustainability. I want to give you guys, if you have anything else to say, any advice for someone who might want to start in Voice, any advice to people who might want to start an organization that's similar, anything like that, we can start with Vickie.
So sure, I think, there's always a lot, but I think one of the things advice that I have, particularly for Gen Z, is that what I admire about your generation is that you're not waiting, right? You're not saying, I think there's a sense of urgency around sustainability, around social and racial justice issues. And I love that there's these opportunities, right, through, either through our organization or even through what you're doing with your podcast, to say, like, I don't have to wait to kind of navigate through a hierarchy to get in a position to have influence, right? I can do that now. And so when I think about Voice, I think about an opportunity, right, for people to be part of an organization immediately starting to impact change and not having to wait and being able to say, like, I'm going to get with a group of individuals who are thinking about these things and feel my sense of urgency, and we're going to collaborate, and we're going to, in our own little corner of the world, make a huge difference, right? And we can do that. And I think as we add more students, as more people come to the program, stay with the program, we become kind of this larger family. I think the impact is going to be felt. There'll be a huge ripple effect. Like Diego was saying, I think we're going to be one of the largest, if not the largest organization, and that people will have to hear our voice. They're going to say, like, this, there's impact here. Let's see what they're thinking about that. So yes, I definitely encourage everyone to, reach out. I think whether or not, you don't necessarily have to be, in an environmental studies major or anything like that. We have students who are involved in all sorts of, different majors in college or different areas of interest. And that actually adds a lot to the organization, but a commitment to helping achieve those, sustainability goals and equity goals, I think is what we have in common. And this is certainly a place where you can do that.
And I would say that, one of the big things that we're doing is we're trying to level power imbalances, right? So the thing is, like, when a college student comes into Voice, or a high school student or whatever, even if they're not going to college, it's not like they're like some junior person, who has to like get experience and wait their turn. Like, it's basically like you're fully formed adults. Like, what's all that about anyway, right? Like, the cognitive ability and lots of other abilities of somebody of that age are like, can make as big a contribution as anybody else on the planet, for sure, right? And so that's our premise, right? Come into Voice and contribute. Like, we'll give you as much opportunity and a responsibility as you want to be creative, be yourself, bring your authentic self, discover what you're capable of, and fully express that passion that you have for helping the planet and society. So that's something that's really, really important to us. And I think the second thing that's really important to know is that we do value relationships and community of Voice, and so we hope that everyone leaves our program or is kind of like moving in and out of organization. When they leave, they think to themselves, like, wow, like I know people from Voice, and I'm going to meet up with them later in my career, and we've shared things together, and like we spend time, we allocate time for people to get to know each other, for them to form relationships, because again, I'm a quote Vickie, there is no action that isn't born of relationship. I'm probably murdering that. Vickie, please save me. What is the actual quote?
Well, I would say action through relationship, right? I mean, for me, I think about so many of the issues in the world are that we try to compartmentalize. We say, well, keep emotion out of this, or this is work, and this is social, and what we're doing is building a community that recognizes that if we're going to be successful, we have to care about one another. We have to build a sense of community around what we're doing, and that you can be part of something great, enjoy it, have friends there, enjoy being part of the work that we're doing, and that is how we make actionable change. So yeah, that whole idea of sort of action through relationships is a huge part of what we're trying to build in our community.
Yeah, and I can say definitely from personal experience, between like hanging out with our SALs or going to review sessions and everything, you definitely build that community in the program, and just being around people who are like-minded is always such a good opportunity. If anyone listening is at USC, we are actually starting a USC chapter of Voice coming soon. Maybe by the time this episode is out, it'll already be formed and on campus, but we'll keep you updated on our social media about that. But I guess with that, we can kind of wrap up this episode. Thank you guys both. Really enjoyed the conversation. Loved hearing again about Voice, even being in it, but I just feel like I got so much more out of hearing the background of it and the philosophy behind it. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you both. I really enjoyed this conversation.
So what did you think of the episode?
I think it was great to talk about such an innovative idea of like having a sustainability ratings platform, and also just hearing about how inclusive and empowering the culture is. at a student-centered organization just sounds amazing. And I'd love to hear about your experience working there.
Yeah, it was a really good experience. You know, I'm not gonna lie, it was really tough this summer because I was working full time and then I would do Voiz after work, but it was definitely worth it. I mean, I don't think I would have, been doing that at 8 o'clock at night after working for 8 hours if I didn't love it. So they're writing reviews every week. I guess just for background, I ended up writing about like different juices for like the majority, or like different drinks, which like seems really boring, but then once you get started and like discovering new companies and kind of seeing how all the drinks are different and the companies can vary widely and how, I guess, transparent they are is kind of crazy. I mean, you can look at some brands. I was definitely focused on brands that were trying to market themselves as super healthy and super, environmentally friendly, but a lot of the times you'd go in there and you'd be looking for some kind of sustainability report and it would just not be there, or they say, oh, we're going to be net zero by 2050, and then no indication of that happening or no progress. So definitely opened my eyes to companies and what they were doing. And another thing that was really interesting about that experience was I didn't realize how, they talked about it in the episode, but I didn't realize how global it was. We were talking to kids from the UK and all over Asia and everything like that. It was crazy seeing like how many people were involved in this organization. So yeah, I don't know if you had any other questions or takeaways from that, but
yeah, that's really funny you mentioned the kind of transparency of the work companies are actually doing in specifically beverage industries, because obviously they're one of the main producers of plastic in the country. So I recently read up on how California is going to ban the kind of deceptive, these like recycling logos, because they are physically, or I guess chemically recyclable, but there's no market for that. So, and these manufacturers know that. So it comes down to what you were talking about, the transparency and how much the waste is a company actually generating versus like what they seem like, or those targets that they, promote on their websites. So Voiz definitely sounds like a perfect place to kind of get students to think about these things and publish them and to a broader audience. So it sounds amazing. Maybe that's how I should spend my summer next year.
And I'm also glad you brought up packaging, because it's like not even the half of it. Like I was thinking, oh, they have a plastic bottle and this is like the worst company ever. But looking at all of the stuff that comes before that is also insane. And also looking, oh my gosh, you can get such a deep wormhole of certifications, and it like then you have to assess like, is the certification even good? I don't know if you saw like Seaspiracy and that whole thing about the dolphin safe tuna and how like that label isn't actually very credible. That's the case for many of these things, where if you actually look into the certifications that they're just putting up saying that, oh, this is organic or this is whatever, not all of that stuff is true either. So it can get sometimes a little, depressing a little bit, but I think being in the community, at least seeing other people there fighting the same cause gives you a little bit of hope. But I digress. If you would like to hear Imani rant about drinks, you can go look at my page on Voiz. Feel free. But yeah, I guess we can kind of wrap up from there. If you want to hear more about Voiz and what they're doing, you can follow them at voiz.sustainability on Instagram and all their social media. And then their website is voizreviews.com. If you want to hear more about us and our podcast and get some more information about how to get involved with Voiz, you can follow us at Eco Alarm Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of our social medias. And with that, you can't do all the good the world needs, but the world needs all the good you can do. Bye, guys.